Everybody here loves a good story. Doesn't matter if you're in your room or watching online. You love a good story that kind of pulls you in. And it's why we read books. It's why we go to movies. It's why we watch television shows. It's why we watch Netflix and chill, which I found out the other day. That means something totally different. But I mean, whatever. But that's the reason. That's the reason some of us got caught up in the Tiger King. First of all, if it wouldn't have been for COVID, none of us would have watched that ever. And if you did watch it, you don't tell everybody, you just tell a few people. But we got caught up in the story. Now, the thing that makes a story interesting, the thing that really pulls us into the story is the character has to overcome some sort of conflict. Because if the character didn't overcome sort of conflict, we wouldn't watch the story. Like, who would go to a movie about a person that got up every day, went to the same job, came home, everything was great, went to bed, got up the next day, and did the same thing? Nobody's going to watch that movie because it's boring, because there's no conflict involved. But when conflict is involved, it pulls us into the story because all of us can identify in some way, shape, form, or fashion with that conflict. For example, Toy Story. How many of you saw this movie? How many of you saw this movie? Okay, yeah. Don't you just love this guy? First of all, his voice was done by Tom Hanks, who was Forrest Gump, who you got to love Forrest Gump or something is broken in your heart. But the thing that pulled us into this movie was Woody had conflict in this movie. He used to be the favorite toy, and all of a sudden he's not the favorite toy because Buzz Lightyear came in, and it's just a struggle throughout the story, and we got pulled into it, and the struggle actually makes the story better. It's the same thing with the Hunger Games. Now, I read the books before I saw the movie. The books were fascinating. It was a 3-book series. I read all 3 books in 4 days. I could not put them down. I'm reading them in the kitchen, like everywhere. But the thing, and then they did the movie and picked a supermodel to be Katniss, which I guess if you got to pick somebody to be Katniss, that's who you want to get. But the thing that made this movie so good, it was the struggle. It was the conflict. She had internal conflict going on, like, do I have what it takes to make it through this? She had external conflict where everybody was coming against her. And if it would have been for the conflict in this story, it wouldn't have been a great book series and it would have been a great movie. My favorite, though, of all is my boy, Ricky Bobby, right? Now, I saw this movie, and it's got some memorable one-liners. I'm telling you, I'm paralyzed. Like, I love this. But what made this movie great was the conflict. Like, he had all these racing superpowers, right? And all of a sudden, he loses them and is delivering pizzas on a bicycle. And by the end of the movie, he gets his superpowers back, and it's great. But the thing that made this a great movie wasn't Ricky Bobby or Will Ferrell, whoever. It was the fact that he had some conflict in his story. Now, my walk-away point today is this, that I put my cards on the table. I want everyone ultimately to say yes to Jesus. And the reason I want all of us to say yes to Jesus is saying yes to following Jesus is saying yes to a greater story than we would ever write for ourselves. Like if God said, hey, here's a blank book and a pen, you write your story, and you could write anything you wanted to about your life, and you gave it to God, he would still look at that story and say, you think way too small. I've got a better story for you in mind. And we see this all through life, but more importantly, we see it in the scriptures. There's a guy named Matthew who a lot of people believe he actually saw this event with his own eyes. Matthew records an event in Matthew chapter 4 that if we're not careful, we'll just skip over it, but it's so loaded. Matthew said this in Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 and 19. One day, as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew, throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Now, think about this. Peter and Andrew weren't looking for Jesus, but he was looking for them. And he wasn't looking for them so he could shame them or push them down or hold them back. He was looking for them because he had a better plan for their lives. And there may be somebody here today, or maybe you're watching online, and you're not necessarily looking for Jesus. That's fine. He's looking for you. He's not looking for you because he wants to shame you or push you down. He's looking for you because he wants to write a better story than you're currently writing for yourself. That's what he did for Peter and Andrew. Watch this. They're just out fishing. They weren't reading their Bible. They weren't praying. They weren't singing a worship song. They were fishing. And everybody in this room that knows when you fish, there's not a lot of worship that goes on when you fish, like especially if they're not biting, right? And so he goes on, Jesus called out to them, come follow me, and I'll show you how to fish for people. Notice the exclamation point. He's like, yeah, come on, this is exciting. And they left their nets at once and followed him. Now, how weird was this? Because if I'm Peter and Andrew, come follow me and I'll show you how to fish for people. I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know. Do we take our net? Do we throw it on people, pull them in? We can get arrested for that, I think. I'm not sure, but let's follow that guy. Jesus showed up not with a command, but with an invitation. We're used to Jesus issuing commands. Stop it. Don't do it. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Jesus is simply going, hey, guys, I want to invite you into a better story. And he did. Can you imagine if Jesus would have told Peter everything that was going to happen in his life? Peter wouldn't have believed it. Because if you would have asked Peter and Andrew their vision for their life, like, what's the best thing that could happen? They would have said, we want to have the best fishing business in Capernaum, because that's where their house was, that's where they were located. And that's why, in their minds, that was a big idea, but God had bigger plans. What if Jesus would have said, hey, Peter, here's the deal. Follow me, and over the next 3 years, you're going to get a front seat to the greatest miracle in the history of the world, the resurrection, my resurrection. I'm going to die and come back to life. And then you're going to preach on the day of Pentecost. 3,000 people are going to get saved. And then one day, people are going to name their children after you. Cathedrals are going to be named after you. Cities are going to be named after you. Peter had no idea that any of that was going to happen. He just accepted an invitation to follow Jesus, and he stepped out of normal into immeasurably more. But it wasn't without struggle. One of the things I love about the Scriptures is Scriptures don't censor the struggle that people go through. Scripture is very clear. In fact, if you've ever read through Matthew, Mark, or Luke, or John, Peter's probably the person that you find yourself identifying with the most, because he's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. The writers of Scripture, once again, did not censor the struggle that people went through. But in church world today, we're taught to censor our struggles. Don't talk about your struggles. Don't be open about your struggles. Don't admit your struggles. Because if you do, in fact, we're told two main lies. If you're struggling in your walk, number one, you're probably not a Christian, because Christians don't struggle, which everything we read in the Bible goes against that. Peter's crucified upside down. Paul gets his head chopped off. Jesus himself is crucified. Where in the world did we ever get the idea that we would never struggle? And the second lie is this. If you are struggling, it's probably because you either lack faith or there's some secret sin going on in your life that you're not talking about. Has nothing to do with the fact the reason we struggle is because we're human beings and we live in a fallen world. So I started thinking about the people in this room here today, and the reason I thought about this is because this is true for me. How many times have we wanted to put a period where God just wants to put a comma? How many times have we thought it was over, and God goes, you know what? That part of your life right there is so screwed up. Watch me take it and use it for good. He does that. And he does it in Scripture, and he's doing it in our church. And instead of just talking about that, I want to introduce to you today 2 of my really, really good friends who are in this church. In fact, Cole is on staff. Cole and Addie, would you come join me on stage? This is Cole and Addie Farlow. If you'd welcome them on stage with me for a second. Cole joined our staff back in February. He's over all of our social media, so all the videos and cool little tiles and stuff you see online. Cole does all that. Addie has sang with us on Sundays. She's been a part of the worship team. And I invited them on stage today because their story is not without conflict. God's still writing it, but it's one of the most beautiful things that we'll ever get to hear about here at Second Saint. So guys, how are y'all doing? Y'all have a seat. I'm sorry. I told
Super good, man.
Do what?
How are you?
Better than I deserve. That's what I know Dave Ramsey said it first, but it's true for me too. And I love Dave. So you guys talk to us. Give us the Cliff Notes version of how you became a Christian, Cole. Like, how did you start? How did you say yes to Jesus? Like, what happened?
Yes, so for me, I grew up, we're from Indiana, and so, yeah, thank you, great state. And small town Indiana, I guess. And so for me personally, I grew up going to church. You know, I have one of those stories where it's like I was born on the front pew sort of thing. And
Were you really?
Yeah, basically. How intense.
That's so weird. I'm just kidding. Keep going.
Water birth and the
Yeah.
baptismal.
Dear
you know?
God.
We're never gonna have anybody get baptized again. But you know, I grew up in one of those towns where it was like everybody is a Christian, and you know, I put air quotes in there for that. But for me, like the church we were a part of, you know, it was really small. Average age of like 85, you know, turning your hymnals to number 320. Now listen, we laugh a little bit, but that's a great thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it really is. So that's not
Sure.
a judgmental statement, but for me as a kid growing up, I didn't connect, and quite frankly, like I just hated going to church for a long time.
I get it.
And so I really ran away from God when I started to get into high school. Up until right before my senior year, actually, there had been some of my football coaches that took me and some of my friends under their wing, and we would go to their house on Sunday nights, and you know, we would watch Sunday Night Football, and we would eat their pizza, and you know, break stuff, and it was hard for them, but
Right.
It's funny to hear them talk about it now. They say we're never going to do that again for anybody, but y'all are worth it.
Yeah.
So. Sorry, guys.
That's how you met Jesus?
So that's how I met. Through that small group, I met Jesus, and I had a really powerful personal encounter with him. You know, not the whole sit down in church, shut up, listen, wear the right things, say the right things. I had a real relational, powerful moment at some high school football coach's dinner table one night, and it completely changed my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Addie, how about you? How did you come to know Christ?
Yeah. So I grew up in the church. My dad was a pastor, and so I was a PK kid, pastor kid.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate. He was a part of this brilliant, loving, God is like the greatest thing ever church. And everybody believed that and was so sold out. And so I was really fortunate to grow up with that, and I believed that fully growing up. But I really struggled with like insecurity with that and wanting to be like the perfect Christian, and put a lot of pressure on myself to be that person that I thought I had to be in order to be a follower of God, a people pleaser.
Right.
Yeah, and so once I got into college, and that faith was made a lot more my own. And I just got to see who I was in Jesus' eyes and how like worthy and valuable I was with the mistakes that I made.
Right.
And with what I had gone through in my life. Then that insecurity was falling off, and I was so much more free and following him a lot more genuinely, I'd say. Yeah.
That's awesome. So how did y'all meet? I mean, who was interested in who first?
He was interested in me.
Oh.
Very much so.
Yeah, but like it was like y'all were young. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was 15 and Cole was 16. And so we both went to schools that were kind of close to each other, and
my prime.
He was a stud. He had the earrings. He wore the pink swim trunks.
Stop.
Sorry, okay.
Whoa. He wore the what? He wore what?
He wore pink swim trunks.
I'm actually surprised. I should not say this. It's still, there's photos on our Facebook still from that week 10 years ago.
Really?
And I should not have told you that. But you can find me and her and me in my pink swim trunks.
Okay.
And my earrings.
Okay.
In Florida.
Okay.
So cute. So
That's not the word I was thinking. But yeah, but keep going.
So we both went to Campus Life, which was kind of like our youth group growing up, and they went on big trips with all the surrounding high schools during like spring break and summer and things. And so for spring break, we both went to Florida. And what better way to find your soulmate than to go to Florida, where you're supposed to hang out with Jesus?
Amen.
Right?
So if somebody here and they're single, they just need to go to Florida.
Just go to Florida.
Okay, with pink swim trunks, by the way. So how did you walk up to her and say, "My name's Cole, and you're going to be my wife"? Like, how did that?
So yeah, I saw Addie very quickly once we got up, because you rode the bus down with your school, And then, we all unloaded and,
Right.
and got our rooms and all this stuff. And so I saw Addie, and I said, I got to have this girl. Very decisive.
Yeah.
Within a couple hours, I had seen her, and I said, will date this girl.
Really?
I'm a driven person.
Yeah.
And so seriously, I had some good friends. So I told my guys, I said, I want to date this girl. And, they said, listen, here's what you do. And so we concocted this plan step by step.
Like you
I
wrote it
wish
out.
so bad I would have kept it because we wrote it out, actually.
You wrote out a plan
Like,
on how you were going to date. Okay,
how I'm
this
going to
is-
go from not even met the girl
Yeah.
to she's my girlfriend
Okay.
in 5 days.
Okay.
I had a plan.
Okay, I love it.
And so Addie here, you can take this part. Addie stepped in and
Yeah,
bypassed a lot
yeah,
of my
so one
plan
of his
that
one of his friends told me that he had like this really big crush on me, and
Right.
I was so excited about that, just wanting a boyfriend. So I went on Facebook, found Cole, looked under his like account information, found his phone number, and texted him, and I was like, hey.
You. So you're a stalker.
I don't know why I did it.
Okay.
I have no idea.
But you-
I wasn't sad about it.
No, I mean, but she totally
She
blew
made
up
it
your plan.
easy.
She
I-
blew up your plan.
It hurt my pride a little, but then I got over it because I'm like, well, I skipped step 1 through 4. I got her number, I met her, and we kind of like each other, like all in one. You know what I mean?
So y'all started dating when you were 16. She was 15.
Yep.
And then,
We should have brought the picture. We have a picture. It's
well, we'll figure that out.
extremely embarrassing.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. And so tell this story though, Cole, because you're gonna love this. This is great. So you finally worked up the courage after some time to tell Addie that you loved her, and how'd that go?
Yeah, so I was 16 years old, and everybody at 16, you know what you want at 16.
Absolutely.
You've got it figured out.
100%.
So I knew Addie and I, we'd been dating for 1 month, right? 1 month?
Roughly.
Yeah.
Roughly. And so I'm like, man, I love this woman.
Yes.
I will marry her. I'm going to tell her.
Absolutely.
So I think we were in my car or something outside your house.
Stang.
My Mustang, which is really cool. And I said, babe, I love you. And she looked me in the eyes and she said, thank you. It's true, isn't it?
It's true. I feel so bad.
But Addie, like, add a little bit to that. Like, you kind of baited him into saying it, didn't you?
No, yeah. So my insecurities, I really wanted to be loved.
Right.
And so kind of like the week leading up to that or so, I just kind of like made it seem like I was going to tell him I loved him.
Uh-huh.
She
And
baited
so
me.
once
did.
he
She
said it,
totally
though, I like
did.
freaked out and I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck? We're like 15, 16. I can't tell you I love you. So I didn't.
You just said thank you.
So I just said thank you. And we
She
just
was really thankful.
moved
Did-
on.
Did you want to, like, literally drive
Throw
your car off
myself.
a cliff?
Yep.
Yep.
Off the
But
top of
she
a building,
eventually
all
said
that.
it. How long did it take her?
1 week later.
1 week later. Did
I
you
figured it out.
You did.
Yeah.
You figured it out in
She
1
just
week.
needed a week.
At 15, dear God.
more week.
I missed that train. Did you? How many missed that train? You figured it out when you were 15. Okay. Rest of y'all aren't playing. That's fine. So you meet and then because y'all are how old right now?
26.
26 years old. 26 years old. So you meet and you get married and then Cole, you go right in ministry, right?
Yeah, so for me, after I had, I became, it's like I grew up Christian because my parents were. Then I became a Christian because I decided it. And that changed my life completely my senior year. And I decided to go to a Christian school to study ministry because I wanted to be in ministry full time. And so after that kind of was over and I was graduating, my senior year, we were graduating on that Saturday after our finals, and I was so eager. They wanted to give me a month off at this job I had accepted. I said, no, I'm graduating Saturday.
Sure.
So I didn't even walk my ceremony. My grandma was super mad. Sorry, Grandma. I didn't walk. I just packed up my car, drove 2.5 hours south, moved in, and started my job that very weekend. And so
As a youth
as
pastor.
a youth pastor,
at a
yeah,
church.
full time, because I had worked in ministry as an intern, or because I was just learning, I was studying
Sure.
for 4 years, but then that was my first I'm a full-time
It's your real job.
vocational pastor. They paid me money. I couldn't believe it. It wasn't a lot, but they paid
Well,
me.
yeah, you're a youth pastor. Let's just be honest. So, Addie, how did you feel about that? Because like your dad was a youth pastor, and so all of a sudden you get to marry a youth pastor.
Yeah,
And so,
no, I was really excited.
A good-looking one, too.
A very good-looking one.
Sorry, it's 11:15 or 11:30.
you don't even know what time it is. It's fine. I was talking to your wife, and you totally interrupted. No.
Yeah. So I was really excited to be with the pastor because I wanted that. I loved growing up with that. If I were to be able to have kids one day, I would want my kids to experience that and to have that life and to be a part of a super loving, sweet church family.
Right. So you guys are in ministry.
Yeah.
Cole, you're working full time at a church. Your ministry's super successful, but there was a dark side. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so like I said, I'd been in ministry for a little while, and I was a youth pastor at an awesome church in Indiana, and over the course of those 4 years, I dealt with kind of a serious bout of mental health issues, so a lot of anxiety, depression, and also about 4 years pretty badly with some alcoholism. And so I was a pastor in ministry and an addict, and I was anxious and depressed, and that was really, really tough.
So the anxiety and depression and the alcoholism, and when you say alcoholism, like you weren't like talking about a glass of wine with a meal or a beer with a burger. You were talking about like you went, like walk us through like how that addiction, like how you discovered that addiction.
Yeah, so I think the first time it really was, I'll back up. On my 17th birthday, I was in high school. I drank for the first time ever, and it's kind of funny because my birthday falls on the Thanksgiving week, and so what happened was some of our college friends that went to college that year, as freshmen, they had come back home for Thanksgiving break, and they threw this party called Tacos and Twerking. And
tacos
and twerking. I'm not joking,
That's
actually.
gonna be our next series after Ghost Stories.
Yeah,
We're
so
gonna
they
do
call me up.
Tacos and twerking. How y'all
Hey.
feel about that? Everybody good? Some of y'all don't even know what twerking is. That's fine.
You could show us.
No, I couldn't. No, I couldn't. I mean, I could, but nah, man. Just go.
I'd like to see it.
No, you wouldn't. You would never, ever escape.
Yeah,
your
you're right.
memory.
I don't
yeah,
know.
that would be bad.
I don't know about
That'd
that.
be bad. Yeah.
Anyway, so I get a call. They're like, "Y'all want to go to Tacos and Twerking?" I'm like,
Yes.
"Heck yes,
Yes,
I do.
absolutely.
That sounds incredible."
Yes.
And so that night, I actually drank for the first time, and it's really interesting looking back on it now because I wouldn't have known this back then as a kid, but now I can look back and see it gripped me. It grabbed me. Just that, not even just the fact that I thought it felt good, but everything I was worried about, everything that I had maybe some anxiety about, everything I had a fear of just melted away. And I think that feeling alone, was so addictive for me.
That temporary relief.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what happened then is, I being in that small Indiana town where, again, everybody's a Christian, everybody knows everybody, it made it hard for us to get alcohol all the time. So it was kind of a level of accountability for me. And then going to a Christian college where we literally signed a lifestyle covenant that said, I won't drink for 4 years. And some of y'all are like, stupid school. It was good for me.
Right.
It really was.
Because you could have got kicked out of school. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, because you get kicked out. So I graduate, and what happens is I move 2.5 hours south, and I'm on my own for the first time ever. And I'm feeling a little celebratory because I just finished school. Addie and I, we weren't married yet. We had about a month till we got married, and so I moved into our place first. And I'll never forget that first night, and this is kind of where I realized this might be a problem. That first night I was there, I went and I bought a 6-pack of beer. And I wasn't like, it wasn't in my head like, oh, I'm going to get hammered.
Right.
But for me, one turns into all of them.
Right. So you drank them all.
Yeah. And so I woke up the next day, and I don't know if I knew that this was going to be a reoccurring theme for a long time, but I woke up the next day with tons of shame,
Yep.
tons of guilt, and
Yep.
it's really interesting looking back to that moment. I can see almost where the enemy got me, because it was on the first day I had this thought, I can't tell anybody. I cannot tell anybody.
Why did you feel that way?
Because I don't know if this is fully true or not, because it's been a long time since I've been on the other side of the coin, but as a pastor, at least you feel like I'm expected to be perfect.
Right.
I cannot slip up. And, it's funny to me because a lot of times when a lot of pastors, they'll give examples of like, I mess up too. It's always about road rage. Like, I honked at some guy that pulled out in front of me. Like, oh, wow, I got a lot more issues than road rage,
100%.
man. So I just felt that, like, I'm expected from the day I graduate to the day I accept the job. I'm a pastor now. I have to clean it up.
So okay, hold on to that thought, because you're wrestling with an addiction, you're in ministry, you love Jesus, but you feel like you can't tell anybody. Now, I want to pause real quick, because there's people in this room that you're in the middle of a struggle right now, and you don't feel like you can tell anybody. And the reason you don't feel like you can talk about it is because you know that shame and guilt is you think it's gonna rain down on you, and you fear the consequences. And let me just say, I get that. I understand. And we think we think it's better to suffer in silence than to speak it out loud. And that's one of the biggest lies of the enemy, is that you have to, because as followers of Jesus, we're called to love one another, encourage one another, support one another, restore one another, not shame one another. And so you're battling with this, and you're in minute, like, you love Jesus.
Yeah, I love Jesus a lot, and I loved ministry. And I think for me, what brought on so much anxiety is I love these things so much. I feel like I was born to do this.
Right.
I never want to lose it, and I'm afraid, and I was seriously gripped by the fear of the fact that I would lose it if anybody found out.
So, and pay attention to that, because essentially, more fear and anxiety came about as a result of him trying to hide something. And the reason I say that is because I know a lot of people that wrestle with fear and anxiety, it's because we're trying to hide something that if we just get it out in the light, it can get healed.
Yeah.
So
and for me, it was that anxiety that caused me to be up late at night, and I couldn't sleep, so then I'd drink more, and it was this just deadly cycle that kept me going in just a real bad direction, and it's really painful for us.
How did you, Addie, obviously, you didn't know about all this when you got married, so what are you thinking this whole time?
I didn't go into marriage hoping or thinking that my husband was an alcoholic. That just wasn't what I was expecting.
Right.
And so, it was really surprising, kind of, because pretty immediately after we got married, there was just that struggle with beer, and then after a couple of years, it moved on into liquor, actually, which I think really intensified it.
Yep.
And so I just had the mentality of like, okay, he messed up, but tomorrow will be better. He messed up, but tomorrow will be better. Just thinking every single day that he'll be healed tomorrow.
Right.
God will do something tomorrow.
Right.
Even if not tonight, like, I know that it will get better. That wasn't the case for a lot of the days that I thought that was going to happen, but that's kind of what I was battling. And also, along with him, just I had to keep that secret too, because I was so scared that if I tell people, they'll tell our pastor, Cole, then people will then shame Cole. And so just all that fear of just and pain that we were going through and doing it alone.
You're trying to protect him.
Yeah.
Trying to protect Cole. Like, how did Addie support you during this? Because she's fighting the battle herself, but like, how did you feel supported by Addie during your struggle?
Yeah, for me, and I said this last service, is it's amazing because Addie's so good at loving people, and your love for somebody can only go as far as the amount of crap you're willing to step in with them.
That's so good.
So, and Addie, for me, she was very willing to walk through anything that I was going to go through. And so, it's just really, we had multiple nights where, for me, I was in the middle of mental anguish, having some panic attack. And what's interesting is I never knew what anxiety was.
Right.
It was always kind of like, I know people talk about that, but I don't really know what that is, and I'll probably never have it. And I got it bad. And so I was in the middle of panic attacks in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., probably a little tipsy at this point, and she would lay there and hug me, and she'd grab her phone and she'd type in what's the song? I keep forgetting the song. Tremble by Mosaic, and we just sit there and listen to the song. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. And we just listen to the song over and over and over. And as I would just cry, and she would cry, and she'd hug me until I finally would calm down. And that's amazing. Those are the kind of moments that we would experience together. And it's hard to talk about, but it's amazing.
It's so good though, man. I mean, it's so good in. Yeah, it's just so good. So, you back up a little bit. So, I hardly ever check my Instagram DM messages. Like, people are like, I DM'd you 4 weeks ago, and I'm like, oh, I don't check them. I'm not that smart when it comes to social media. And so I just pulled up my DMs one day, and I had I don't know why. I can't explain it. And I had a DM from Cole. And so Cole, walk us through how that came about.
Yeah, so many of you know, when you're fighting a battle, it gets tiring. Because, you talk about, one step forward, 2 steps back all the time, and it feels like I'm losing. And it just gets so hard and tiring. So we were starting to get to the point eventually, like, we want this gone.
Right.
And something we really struggled with was, like, realistically, I got to the point where I'm willing to tell people, but I don't know any, and I assume that there are pastors out there that struggle with addiction too.
There are.
But who is vocal about that? Besides, and I knew of Pastor Perry and some of the things he had been walking through, because I'd been kind of following you for a while, and I just thought, I'm going to shoot him a message on Instagram. And I'd never done this. It was a morning. I was frustrated. I was hungover. And I was just so frustrated. I wanted to be free so bad that I just was doing random stuff at this point to try to get there. And I shot you a message, and within probably 30 minutes or so, he responded.
Because it was short.
I was like, what?
Because you didn't send me a book.
And I feel like, I'd never met you, but I knew, Perry, if I send him more than 2 sentences, he ain't going to read it.
I'm not.
When
the email goes like this, I'm like, oh, wow, thanks. And I'm ADD.
It was like, hey, my name's Cole. I'm a young pastor. I'm an alcoholic. Can I pick your brain? Like, that's all it was. I still have it. But you responded, man, and you said, I'll call you this week, and you did. And
yeah, I forgot. So I called you 4 days later, so I feel horrible about that. But we eventually, I got around to it.
Man. Yeah.
Well, but I never checked. So here's what's weird. I get this random message from this guy that I don't even know. And the first thing that people say when somebody reaches out like this is, oh, I can't. If I help him, I'll have to help somebody. I'm gonna help somebody. And a man much smarter than me named Andy Stanley, I heard him say one time, do for one what you wish you could do for all. You can't do it for everybody, but you can do it for somebody. And so for me, I can tell you where I was standing, and the Holy Spirit clearly told me to reach out to him, and so I did, and we had a good conversation, that first conversation.
Yeah.
But I told you, I said, he said, what do I do? And I said, you've got to go tell your church leadership or your pastor or whatever, and your response was?
No.
So it pretty much ended the conversation right there. I was like, okay, but like, no, but you had a reason.
I said, I can't, because I don't, again, as a pastor, there's only, I can have road rage, but after that, like, it's unacceptable.
Right.
And so I was so fearful, so gripped by fear that everything we'd worked for, all the dreams we'd had, I was born to do this, and within 4 years of starting, I've screwed it up. They're going to fire me.
I know nothing about that. Yeah, can't identify at all.
I'm glad to be your friend.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Misery loves company.
It does, man. It does. But eventually you did.
Kind of like what I said is we just were so tired of messing up every day. Like, oh, I fell again. Oh, I fell again. Oh, I fell. That I'm like, screw it. I'm just gonna go tell him and hope for the best. And
what happened?
Long story short, we got let go. And that was, I don't think anything even comes close to how painful that was.
Yeah, no, it was really, it was like losing our family, because these are some of our previous students down here, and just like walking away from them was really painful.
So,
yeah, we gave up we had to leave everything behind. So we immediately sold our house. Obviously I didn't have a job anymore, and I had to travel an hour north. And I was going to live with her parents, my in-laws, and she quit her job to come with me so that I could do treatment.
She quit her job to go with you to do treatment.
Yeah.
Addie, talk to us about that for a second, because, like, just from an outsider's perspective looking in, like, you probably had people even say to you, like, why are you with him? What made you stay? Why didn't you walk away? What made you stay with him and encourage him and support him? Because, and I didn't say this in the last services, but I mean, it's hit me all day. You're one of the reasons that he's sitting there right now. I mean, God used you to save this man's life. I mean, you're one of the reasons, you're one of the main reasons. You're one of the main reasons he's sitting there, and it's so awesome to have somebody that'll walk with you through the fire. So what was it that compelled you to do that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. That means so much. But for me, really, there wasn't a choice. Like, I knew that this man was my husband, and that I had chosen him, and when he suffers, I'm suffering. When he's going through something really terrible and awful and painful that I don't even understand, then I'm a part of that as well. And so, and I knew just like, gosh, Cole is just made for so much greatness, and he doesn't believe that about himself. But I know that when he gets through this and keeps fighting, like, God is going to have the most beautiful picture and beautiful story that I'll ever be able to be a part of. And so I was not willing to give that up either.
Yeah, we'll do a relationship series, and I'll let y'all preach it. How to mess it up, that would be my series. But like y'all, obviously. So from there, Nicole, you can tell it from your perspective. Like, you reached out to me and said, "We got fired." I think that's what your text said. I pulled it up this morning. I was reading through them.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So we just had built kind of a relationship for a little while then, because at the end of our first conversation, Pastor P, he said, I want to walk through this with you as much as I can from 10 hours away. And so you flew us out here kind of for a weekend away.
Much needed.
January.
Very needed.
Was that in January?
It was January, February
sometime?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. But it was, I just was like, hey, our church wants to bring you in and just come to church. There was no agenda. There was no anything. I was like, just come to church and hang out. Just be in a place where you don't have any responsibilities or whatever. And we brought him in
and we freaking loved it. It's a lot.
No, it really was cool because they sat like right there on the second row, and like they were so into the service, like they were leaning forward like this, and I was like, I would hire them just to sit there. They're so fun. But then that weekend it took a different turn.
Yeah. So, and we didn't expect this. It's fun.
I didn't either.
So it was the last day. We came from like a Friday to a Monday, a long weekend. And so is that Monday we were getting ready to fly out of GSP. And so we just came and stopped in this parking lot for a second. Just, I don't know. It just was special. Yeah. It was so special to us. And we just were sitting there. And Pastor P called us and on the phone literally like offers me a job. And Addie's like crying, oh my gosh, say yes, say yes. Like, who cares about talking about it or anything? Like, just say yes. So it was crazy, within, we officially accepted a position, and then 4 days later, we're here.
Oh, it was quick.
It was so quick.
But like when you say that, like when you move, like your house sold immediately, like there was all these things that happened that God started doing. And let me just tell you what happened. And the reason I'm saying this is because this one we're going to put online, and there might be a pastor out there, and you're like, oh my God, that's how I get hired at Second Chance. I'm going to Instagram, DM, Perry. I'm not checking them this week. I'm not even going to look at them. I'm not looking at them. Wow. But honestly,
but keep trying and be short.
Yeah. Well, but. I mean, if I'm being honest, so I've put my cards on the table. I love Second Chance, and I'm going to be here hopefully until like the rapture happens or whatever. But if I could also do something else on the side, I feel like I would want to walk with. I mean, I don't know that I could help, but like walk with people in ministry that are struggling because there's so many people, especially in ministry, that like you. People say you're held to a higher standard. And they try to rip some Bible verses out of context and I'm like, oh my God, how would you like that pressure? How would you like that pressure? Because you know what? It's crushing a lot of people. I don't even know why I'm talking about this. My Adderall's wearing off. Yes, I take Adderall. I take the recommended amount. Only God can judge me. All right, so back to your story. The way it happened was I went to lunch with them. And I didn't know them, and so I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like them or not. So I met them at a restaurant because if you meet somebody at a restaurant, you can like fake a phone call and leave. But I'm being honest. But like I loved them, and I left we talked for 2 hours, which for me to eat for 2 hours is a miracle. I mean, and I called Philip and I said, Philip, I am so like, listen, we need to hire him, and I don't know why. I don't even know what he'll do. We'll just make something up, but like. He needs to, like, these people are amazing. I said, take him to lunch tomorrow and tell me what you think. And Philip called me after lunch that day. He took you to Creekside, didn't he? Didn't y'all go to Creekside?
Barbecue.
Yeah, and Philip was like, I think you're right. So we offered him a job, and he came on as director of social media, and it's been
6 months-ish now?
Yeah. He moved here, and 4 weeks later, COVID hit. So it's like, hey, I'm brand new to town.
2. Moved to South Carolina, knew nobody. 2 weeks in, COVID.
Yep.
That was cool.
It was. But
we love it a lot.
We are so thankful.
Yes.
So thankful.
Well, the whole thing is the name Second Chance hit me in the truck going down the road one day. And I had a guy tell me this. He said, the name of your church, just the name of your church, is going to keep a lot of people from coming to your church. And I never will forget my response. I just smiled. I said, that's fine. I said, it may stop them from coming initially. But there will be a day when you hit a wall and your life's so screwed up and you don't feel accepted anywhere, our doors will still be open. Because God's led us to build a house where shame has no name. And Cole is here today. Cole is here today because he had the courage to admit he was struggling. loves Jesus and was struggling. You can love Jesus and struggle. And when he admitted his struggle, there were not unicorns and rainbows. He had to walk through the valley. But now he's on the other side. And you were telling me a lesson about scars.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, like, it's such a, we view struggles as like, I either have it or I don't. Yeah. And something we've learned is like you said, it's a process of walking out of these things, man. Especially addiction. It's a hard journey, really is. I'm not gonna lie to you, but we've learned that it's in the middle of this journey where the good stuff really is. And you know, we always think, oh, you got to struggle, you're bad, you're not enough, you suck, whatever. And that's not the case. It's actually the struggle that's beautiful. And we've learned that like every time I get a scar, I actually get one step closer to God and one step further away from the old man that I left in the baptism tank. You know what I mean? And so I'm learning to like, it doesn't make sense, but you know, Paul says, rejoice when you face trials of many kinds. That's why. Mm-hmm. It's because it's the most frustrating thing in the world, but it's actually the greatest, most beautiful thing in the world, is that when I go through hell, I actually am closer to heaven.
Right.
You know? So that's what we're learning, man.
Let me ask you this question. Do you still struggle?
Yes. And so I do. And for us, kind of what I'm just saying is like we're learning to rejoice in the win and not, oh, I messed up. I don't deserve this anymore.
Right.
Because if that's your measuring stick, like what? None of us get to do, you know, what we're called to do.
Right.
And can I just say, when he let that go, like anxiety, gone.
Completely gone.
Depression,
haven't been anxious for over a year.
Gone. Like there's still that struggle of the after things from the habit, but those things that were gripping him and crushing his soul and tearing him away from the purpose that God had for him, he was healed in those other aspects.
That's awesome. In
incredible ways.
Yeah, so the last 8 months have just been kind of getting rid of the habit. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's so good. Wow.
Well, I told Cole when he came on staff, I said, man, if you ever struggle with anything, tell me. Because our job here is not to shame you. Our job here is to come along and support you. And that's what I think every single one of us need, is a place or a person that will not shame us, but support us and celebrate the wins. Like if you go 3 weeks and you don't have a drink, instead of going, oh, I only went 3 weeks. No, you freaking went 3 weeks. That's freaking awesome. We're going to celebrate that, and we're going to keep moving forward. The thing that's so beautiful is Cole and Addie were, if you would have asked them several months ago, they would have put a period and said, we're done in ministry. But where they might have put a period, God put a comma. Because we serve a God of second chances. And there are so many people here that their story is your story. And there's so many people here that their stories like this could be your story if there's just a place and a process where you can go, I need help. I'm struggling. I'm not okay. That's the first step toward freedom in a way that you could never imagine. Yeah. So, Father, right now, I want to thank you that you are in the business of changing lives. You are in the business of changing stories. Father, we thank you for Cole and Addie and for what we get to see. But God, I thank you just as much for the people in this room that you're getting ready to change our story. You're getting ready, Jesus, to let us see the next chapter. This chapter that we're in right now, it's been maybe the stormiest chapter of our lives, but this next chapter is going to be immeasurably more than anything we could have ever asked or imagined. So Jesus, may we rest in the assurance today that we belong to you. We are yours. And Father, I pray over these next few moments as we reflect on the lives that you've changed and celebrate the stories that you have changed, God, that we will understand that if you can do it for someone else, you can do it for us Thank you, Jesus, for the assurance that we have in you. In Jesus' name.